Hello everyone, good evening and welcome to Yes Corner number 6. And tonight I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by 3 of the team, and they'll tell me if that's the whole team or if that's just part of the team when we get the opportunity to speak to them from IndyLive Radio. So I'd like to welcome the team. First we have Valerie. Hi Valerie.
Hello there, William. How are you?
I'm very well. And hi Fiona.
Hiya.
And hi Marlene.
Hello.
See, there you go. No problem so far. The four of you on screen, and we can hear you all. So thanks very much for joining us. As people who have been watching this will know, what we're trying to do is to highlight the resources that are available to Yes campaigners. And I've been going through several organisations, ones that are really important and add a lot to the movement. So I'm really pleased that we've been able to get our live Indy radio station with us first on now. So I've got the first question, and I'd like that to probably go to all of you, but starting with Valerie. How did you get involved in IndyLive radio?
Well, I was just having a look there, and it was way back in July 2019, so almost 2 years ago. You mentioned the team. We're only a part of it. There's loads of other people. Kevin, not least Kevin Gibney, who was one of the founder members, and there's been a lot of changes. We've got a lot of people that do loads and loads of work. I'm sure Fiona and Marlene will tell you more about them later. I got involved through Marlene. Marlene was asked to go down to be interviewed, and she said, "Do you fancy coming with me?" And I think I ended up sitting in on the interview, and then for some reason, they seemed to take a shine to us, and I told these pensioners for independence, and we were asked to go back and then sit in. We started sitting in on various shows as guests, and then eventually the main presenter of the daytime show had to leave fairly quickly, and we kind of stepped in, and that was it. So we stepped in at that point. Norrie Hunter, that was, and we were doing 3 shows a week at that point in the studio. It was in the studio.
Okay, well, fantastic. So we're coming up to your 2-year anniversary then.
Yeah.
And Marlene, has your journey been told, or have you got anything extra to add to that?
Yeah, it's pretty well been told actually. Val told it very well just now. I was at a meeting. Run by Yes Glasgow Northwest, and they'd invited, I think it was Philippa Whitford. I was just standing around chatting to people, and a chap that I know came up to me and said, Would I go into IndyLive Radio studio to talk about pensioners for independence? So I kind of went, oh well, yeah, okay, I could do that. So I went along. So the first time I went, it was just me and Norrie Hunter was doing the show. So I chatted, and as Val said, I stayed on and had a general kind of input, and then they asked me back. I said to Val, "Do you fancy going with me?" And what she said was then what ensued, and it was all in the studio. I mean, I wasn't there 3 days a week. Norrie was there 3 days a week. I tended to go in once, maybe twice, and gradually we started making suggestions about guests, and then started arranging to get the guests to come on. So it kind of accumulated momentum from there.
It's brilliant. It's a really good example of the movement working together, and that it was open up to other, pensioners for Yes and the Yes groups, and then it kind of, brought in the resources from that. So that's a really interesting story. And Fiona, how long have you been involved in, and how did live radio get its claws into you?
Not as long as Val and Marlene, have to say. I was listening to the radio. I used to enjoy listening to it. Often when I was painting my Yes stones in the back garden, I would be listening to it. And I remember one day that Kevin had put a call out on the radio for podcasts. So I was, and still am, quite an active member of Clackmannanshire Women for Independence. So at one of our meetings, we were just doing that old, hey, we could do that. So next thing you know, we started a podcast, started sending it in, and we were just going around, whatever we were doing that week, we would record bits of it and create a podcast for the radio. When I got more involved was really once the lockdown started, partly because we weren't going out and about doing things that we would have been doing otherwise, but also we started having team meetings, and that was really the first time we'd got to grips with Zoom, this wonderful new invention that's changed our lives. It was quite a novelty when we first started having meetings, and suddenly we were getting to know each other. And the more that we just got to know about how the radio worked, and our tech guy, Steve, who's just a wizard, kept showing me little bits of the process behind the scenes, sort of, this is how this bit works, and this is how you schedule something, and this is how the system does it. So before you knew it, I was actually becoming quite involved in the behind the scenes stuff as well as our podcast. And it just really, we've just gone from there. So that was my story.
No, so it does seem like once it's got you, it doesn't want to let go. Well, you've mentioned Kevin and you've also mentioned Steve, so it'd be good to know who the other people in the team are, and how you kind of come up with all the ideas for what you're looking to do. That'd be really great for us to know. Who wants to jump on that one?
Well, I'll tell you the DJs, if you like, is the other big bits. So we've got Marlene and Val do the daytime show and the sort of the talky stuff, let's call it. But the DJs are quite important. So we've got Steve B, James E, Dr. Dave, and Frankie Boy. Have I missed anybody out? No, Jerry. They all do music shows. Yeah, Jerry. They all do music shows. And that's quite a popular part of the week of the radio, really. So it's that division between talk and music.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fantastic. And anyone else? So Steve does kind of the technical stuff. Kevin's doing a lot of the other things on kind of making sure everything's kind of running, and also some of the live recording for the live streams and events and things like that. Is there anyone else in the team? Anyone who we've missed out? Let's not miss anyone out.
Well, Gemma's. We've got somebody for a change. We've got somebody young. So Gemma's joined relatively recently, and she's bringing a lot of ideas. She's quite committed though, because she's got married recently. She's got a family and she's a student, but she's been doing quite a bit of input, just with ideas. But I think in the future she might put in content as well. You mentioned Steve and the technical side, but Jerry Mulvena as well has been putting out music. He's done a tremendous amount just recently. He used to be much more involved in the Independence Live side on the live streaming, but that's kind of because there's less events happening in real life to live stream. Jerry's given a lot of his time recently, and he's been amazing because there's been quite a lot of technical issues with one thing and another, having to relocate our equipment out of the studio and so on. So I would think Jerry and Steve behind the scenes have been totally amazing, really. So.
Well, it's great. It looks like everyone's willing to try new things and get their hands dirty in different areas. Well, I'd love to know about how it's been in the studio and what's been happening in the studio over the last year and a bit. But before I ask that, Marlene, I know you've got the talking shows and you've got the music shows. What else are you doing? I think you've got a blog as well that you
we do. I mean, I've been probably involved maybe about 6 or 8 months, and I started to realise. I mean, it's great fun doing the live shows, and it's a bit nerve-wracking sometimes, but it is great fun. And I started to think, gosh, we've got this amazing archive of interviews, but once it goes out, it's never seen again, or it's never heard again. So I was chatting to Steve, the IT whiz kid, and he said, well, we've got a blog facility on the website. So I'm used to looking after blogs and websites. I look after the Pensioners for Indy one and my own one. So I started blogging from the IndyLive radio website. So if we do a show, I would, not all of them, but I would sort of put a post on the blog and about a week afterwards and say, this was really good. And sometimes I'd put the recording up on the website. So that's how it started. And then I started to think, actually we could have an on-demand setup, and Steve and Fiona were already using Podbean for podcasts. I set up a SoundCloud channel, so now we've got a bit of a network. We've got the live shows, we've got recorded shows, and we've got at least 3 on-demand platforms, because as well as looking after Podbean, Fiona also looks after the YouTube one, and I look after SoundCloud now with Val's help. So that's actually been quite a development, and I think a really useful one, because not everyone can tune in to when a program happens to be on. This way they can get it anytime.
That's the beauty of digital content, isn't it? It's not just there and gone. And you can reuse it and store it. So that's really interesting. So let's take me back to the start of the pandemic in the UK, kind of March time last year. You were in the studio, and then all of a sudden you weren't in the studio. Did you have any kind of break between the broadcasts, or were you able to flip that to working? I take it you've been working remotely. Who would like to jump into that one?
I'll go on that if you like. There was a little bit of a hiatus, and I would have to pay tribute to Marlene here, because if it hadn't been for Marlene, I don't think the daytime show would have kept going, because we were doing like 3 shows a week. As Marlene said, she didn't always do 3. Kevin was very, very involved at that stage. That's when we were in the studio. So Kevin, myself, and Marlene, among the 3 of us, we would, do a Monday, a Wednesday, and a Friday show for the daytime show. But when it became apparent that the pandemic was getting quite serious, some people immediately started not coming into the studio, right? Mm-hmm. And then it became clear that if we were going to keep broadcasting, we would have to move to remote broadcasting. And Marlene mastered the audio hijack. I wasn't even in Glasgow then, because my sister and her husband asked me to move in with them for the first lockdown up in the north of Scotland. So I was doing all the broadcasting from there. I was in charge of the Zoom. I did the Zoom, but Marlene did the difficult part, which was the audio hijack and the putting it out. And we were doing live then, Marlene, weren't we?
Yeah, we did. Yeah. So I think we did live shows remotely. I mean, where I'm sitting is just the back bedroom in our house. And we did those live shows for about 9 months, Val? Something like that?
Quite a long time, yeah. And at that point, we were using Zoom, but we were doing it in Skype as well. But we were doing, we had the guests during the time slot of the programme, whereas now we've moved to a more flexible setup where we interview and record the guests at a time of their choice, which makes it much easier to get guests. Yeah. And then we edit it and we put it out with music on it was getting so, the workload was massive, so we decided to go to just one daytime show a week. And Marlene and Fiona will tell you a bit more, because they've done brilliant work on the 2 other shows that go on the Wednesday and Monday slots. I'll let them tell you, because they're the ones that I've gradually been catching up. Marlene said I've been helping her, but only a little bit with the SoundCloud, but I've been really terrible. My sister said to me, I'm going to learn to do, and she said, Valerie, you said that to me months ago, you were going to learn to do that. So I've gradually
it's not easy, that's for sure. There's a lot of, when you're starting doing this, moving from live to pre-recorded and editing and audio jacks and everything is really difficult. Yeah. So Marlene or Fiona, who wants to talk through the other couple of shows then?
Do you want to talk about Spotlight, Fiona?
Yeah, sure. Spotlight came about because when the team were in the studio, it used to be quite common they would try and get people to come in as guests into the studio. And sometimes that was quite difficult to get people in, depended where they were, how close they were to Glasgow. But actually, one of the benefits of doing things remotely is you can get guests from all over the place. And there was almost a light bulb moment for us. We thought, instead of expecting them to come to us, why don't we go to them? So instead, because so many Yes groups were starting to do events, particularly by Zoom, we started joining in a lot of those events, enjoying them as spectators, but also arranging with the organisers to give us the audio. And then we turned that audio into what we call the Yes Group Spotlight at 11 o'clock on a Monday morning. So every week we've got something, and they've been very generous with their time and their efforts, and some really great quality. And we've got a 2-hour slot there, which gives you time for a really in-depth look at something and question and answer sessions. So I think we're on to about episode 26 or so of those Yes Group Spotlights, and they're all available on our YouTube, our Podbean, or our SoundCloud. So that again is a remarkable archive of data that's available to the Yes Movement. It's created by the Yes Movement, and it's there for everybody to share. So that's the Yes Group Spotlight.
Great. And that's such a good example, again, of you working with other Yes groups and Yes organisations. I take it you would be quite happy to do a call out for any of those Yes groups who want to kind of provide you the content for that period.
Absolutely.
So is it fair to say they can just drop you a note if there's anyone who's watching?
Absolutely. They can just contact us. I mean, here or contact us via the website. And the thing that happened after we'd got the Yes Group Spotlight going for a while, probably through to last autumn, as Fiona's just described, then I started to kind of realise that I thought there was a bit of a shift in the kinds of topics and themes that Yes groups were organising meetings on. So there was still a lot of meetings that were about how do we get to independence, the kind of things we need to do, and how do we persuade people. But increasingly this last year, I think now Yes groups more and more are organising meetings where they're talking about the kind of Scotland we want. So, independence is for something. And now a lot of people are organising meetings that for what's it for. So, we put together, we talked about that. And then, so we created another programme which goes out on Wednesdays at 11 o'clock, 2-hour slot. That one's called Changing Minds, Moving Forwards. And we've had some great ones. There's been, Oban, the Oban people organised a meeting about land value tax, and they had Kate Forbes, the finance minister. She was there contributing, joining in debate. We had a really good session of meetings about well-being economy and how to bring that into public decision making, and then other topics that are not so easy to grapple, like Scotland's got a drug problem.
We used the drugs conference that you were involved in, William. We took the outputs from that and created a show for the moving forward, changing minds as well.
Brilliant. Well, that's great. Again, just more examples of reusing the brilliant content that we've got in the movement and supporting other organisations. It would be great to hear from anyone who's watching. If you just want to drop us a comment, the types of things that you're discussing now, and if you agree with Marlene and there is a difference and there's been a move away from how do we get it to actually what is it for and what type of Scotland do we want to see. That'd be great if any of you want to drop in that into the comments. That'd be great. So
could I just say something about the music side of it, just in that vein? Because actually we've moved from just churning out, music 24/7. We're very much moving into the future Scotland in that sense as well, because our focus is politics, music and culture. And we're aiming to get 50% of our musical output being Scottish artists, which has been quite a dramatic shift, and current stuff as well. So we've got a lot of support out there for up and coming artists, including playlists. We've got shows dedicated just to new music, Scottish indie music. We've got Gaelic music. We've got cultural side. We've got Scots writers that we interview. We've got Scots speaking poets. We've got chat facilities for Gaelic speakers tied in with Duolingo. So that it's not just anymore about the kind of the immediacy of the independence journey. It's about increasingly what happens when we get there. It's just it struck me when Marlene was describing changing minds. I thought actually that's exactly the same way that the music side's going as well.
And actually just to add something else in about the changing minds, because Val, maybe you could talk about this, because I think Val put this brilliant program together for the Changing Minds series, and it was about the role of music in an independence movement. Tell them a bit about that. Wow, that was really good.
Well, one of the change in minds I had the idea, because we had been interviewing people from Singing for an Independent Scotland, which is a group that's online at the moment, but I think they're hoping when the pandemic eases to move offline and to have singing at all the marches and rallies. And it gave me the idea. We'd also been interviewing Sheena Wellington for our International Women's Day special. We'd interviewed her recently, and so it seemed to me that it was really important to look at the power of music, because if you look at the 1960s, music can be a massive force in culture, obviously, of other kinds for change, because political change isn't just about what people think. It's not just cerebral. It is about how you make people feel and how you move people. And music and song. So I put together like all different things. So there was a bit from the internet, from YouTube, about the power of music during the civil rights movement in America, and that's something I'm particularly interested in. I used to be in a political choir, and also the Estonian singing revolution, where the power of culture and song played a massive part. Leslie Riddick's touched on that quite a bit, I think.
That's really interesting. In the America and during slavery, slaves would sing songs to each other, and they were actually instructions of how to escape from the cotton fields, and they were able to spread on how to get out, by singing songs. So incredibly important. And I wondered, how do you feel that the culture in Scotland will be affected once we become independent? Marlene, do you want to have any thoughts on that?
Oh, I think it will. Well, I mean, I think that culture in Scotland's already pretty powerful. I mean, I lived down in England, Welsh-English border for about 8 years in early 2000s. And, so often kind of English people, it wasn't so much the Welsh, but it was English people saying, oh, you Scots, I mean, you've got all these songs and all that culture. And in comparison, obviously, a bit of a felt lack. I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily the whole story from the point of view of English musical kind of culture, but I think we've already got a pretty strong musical, culture. And in my family, my mum's family, everyone learned to play the fiddle, or you learned to play the piano. And, whenever there was a family gathering, the fiddles came out and the accordions came out. I mean, people sang all the time. So I think it's pretty strong anyway. But my hunch, though, is that after independence, it'll just flourish again. It'll just really strengthen again. And I think it can also go out. It can be a way in which we communicate with the rest of the world as a newly independent nation. So I'm very optimistic about that.
And Fiona, what do you think? Is there a cultural kind of explosion just waiting to happen?
Absolutely. And I think particularly I'm noticing it in the language side of things. So we mentioned there that we've got Scots poets and Scots writers, and Iona Fife, who we've had on the show, but she's also been our Artist of the Week. We play her songs. She's taken on Spotify to get them to agree that Scots can be a language instead of having to describe her songs as in English. And on the back of that, we've got there's a whole nother part of the radio that's to do with the sort of video games music, is in another show that we've got. And one of our listeners is a games designer and has just designed a game in Scots. So you've got this this protagonist in this video game who's speaking broad Scots, and if he doesn't make it, then he's dead. And he's now talking about maybe taking on Steam, which is one of the big games providers, to say, why can't I describe the language of this game as Scots? Why does it have to be English?
Wow, those are brilliant stories. You'll see James there said music feeds the heart and soul. I think we'll all agree to that. Yeah, I think that at the moment, I still think that we see our culture through the prism of the United Kingdom. And I still think we look at our culture very differently than how we would if we were an independent nation. And living in Catalonia, it's very easy to see how their culture is so separate and is viewed through the prism of Catalonia. And I don't feel like a lot of the culture in Scotland is viewed through our own eyes. I still think we take that step back and view it through the eyes of the rest of the United Kingdom. So I think there's a huge, hopeful change coming. I would love to know a little bit more about, because we always see IndyLive Radio next to Independence Live. So for the audience, what's the difference? What's the similarities? How do you work together? And kind of ultimately, how are you funded? How does the radio, where do you get that revenue to make all this brilliant content?
Who do you want? Will I say a little bit and let the other? Basically, the radio doesn't really need a lot of funding. And some things we just pay for ourselves out of our own pockets, like my Zoom account, for example, or Marlene, licenses and so on. But the funding for Independence Live, IndyLive Radio comes under, so we do get some money because, we need money for the systems, the technological systems, but it's fairly cheap. It's not very expensive. So, the money is through crowdfunders, so we will be starting up a crowdfunder again very soon. We do one every now and again, and we're very grateful for any donations. So that is, and I think that is the main source. Really, is the crowdfunder.
Great. So we see your logo separately, but it's very much under that one umbrella of Independence Live.
Yeah,
okay. It is, and I mean, neither the live streaming side of it or the radio station side of it would exist if it wasn't for Kevin. If it wasn't for Kevin Gibney. Kevin's the one person who's supported financially. I mean, these days, well, because he's got the team of us running the radio station, he doesn't need to do that much of the radio station. He has done loads and loads in the past, so he's doing more on the live stream. But the man deserves a lot of appreciation, because without him, none of this actually would be happening. Yeah,
having known Kevin quite well for a couple of years now, his work ethics is pretty incredible. The amount of effort he puts in to make all this happen. Yeah. So I know we'll have people who really want to help. You mentioned the potential of the next crowdfunder, and we also covered the opportunity for Yes Groups to repurpose some of their great content on the shows. Is there any other way that you think that campaigners could get involved and to help IndyLive Radio?
Absolutely. I mean, the first and most important thing, listen to the radio, because without listeners, there's no point in us being here. So, we can always do with more listeners, and not just the radio, but also our on-demand stuff. Go and have a look and see what's on our SoundCloud, our podcast channel, and our YouTube. And I think you'll be bowled over by the content there. And it really helps us as well if you subscribe and if you like things, even just clicking that little thumbs up on YouTube, that helps with the algorithms. So the thing gets seen by more people and the whole thing just starts to snowball. So liking us, sharing things, telling your friend if you've heard a good show, give us feedback on what you're hearing. We've got the Discord chat room if you want to jump on and have a chat with any of us, or tell us what music you'd like. So I think just anything that's interactive is really helpful. And it's very encouraging for us to know there are people out there and that we're not
listening.
I mean, I've got a sort of hope that I carry around with me, which is that now that we've created this body of work and interviews and music, and but from the point of view of the spoken word programs, I've just got this hope that maybe around Scotland now, people who are already convinced about Yes are talking to someone who isn't yet convinced, and they're saying, oh, well, look, if you want to know more about such and such, have a look at IndyLive Radio's SoundCloud, have a look at their YouTube platform, because there is such a lot of good stuff there. And so I just hope that it starts to get used in that sort of way, because that would be fantastic.
I mean, there was one that... Sorry, on you go.
On you go, Fiona.
I was just going to say that an example of that just the other week, there's been you notice little themes coming up in the kind of unionist attack lines, don't you? And recently there's been a lot to do with borders. So we've got a recent couple of podcasts that were Bill Austin, who's the expert in customs and borders. And I've just been responding to tweets right, left and centre by giving them the link to the podcast and saying, look, this term hard border is an absolute nonsense. Do you want to know why? Bang, listen to this. And we've got so much material that actually you could be using in that way.
Yeah,
great. Well, that's definitely a theme that's come across from doing 6 of these now. Is that it's a resource for campaigners, like the radio is, and like some of the other things that we've covered. But really, it's also a resource that campaigners can put in the hand of potential yes voters. And I think we would all be delighted if that was one of the main things that people were doing when they were listening to the radio. Well, ladies, I could speak to you all night. Thanks very much for all of your information. Please do just drop me a note in the comments if you've enjoyed tonight's show. And best of luck. And as the lady said, it's easy. All you have to do to listen to the radio to help out. So thanks very much, Marlene, Fiona, Valerie. Thank you. Bye now.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Bye.
And there you go, IndyLive Radio. If you want to contact me, if you've got any ideas of who you would like to see on Yes Corner, then please do that. And until a couple of weeks' time, thanks so much for watching. Good night. Bye now.